The notice was nailed to the post in the center of Riften's marketplace, right next to a week-old bounty for some bandit chief and a faded decree from Jarl Layla lawgiver about the skooma trade. I had seen it yesterday, but I had not wanted to read the words. Reading them would make them real. The ink was a bit smeared from the morning mist that rolled off Lake Honrick, but the message was clear enough. A caravan organized by a Breton merchant named Cedrin Belmont was bound for High Rock. It would leave from the south gate. The important part, the part that felt like a hammer blow to the chest, was the date. It was leaving in 7 days. I counted them on my fingers, my calloused thumb pressing into each digit. 7. Not a long time in a life, but it felt like an eternity and no time at all. 7 days was the scope of my problem. The whole of my world had shrunk to fit inside a single week. 7 days to convince Muri Valance not to get on that wagon. 7 days to give her a reason to stay in this damp, crooked city at the arse end of Skyrim. The thought was absurd. What reason could I possibly give her? I was Jorgen Snowshod. I was a smith. I worked the forge for Balamand, hammering steel until my arms burned and my ears rang. My days were measured in cooling ingots and the sharp hiss of quenched metal. My hands were stained with soot and marked with small white scars from stray sparks. I could make a sword that would not break, a shield that would hold against an axe, an iron pot that would cook evenly for a generation. These were the things I knew. They were useful things. But I doubted they were the kind of things that convinced a woman like Muri to change the course of her entire life. She worked for Elgrim at his alchemy shop, Elgrim's Elixirs, down by the canal. She was quiet, with a way of moving that seemed too delicate for a place like Riften. She was a Breton, and she had that look about her. Sharp intelligence in her eyes, a kind of thoughtful stillness that made me feel like a great clumsy ox. I had spoken to her maybe 5 times. I bought healing potions I did not need. I asked stupid questions about Nirnroot. She was polite. She smiled. But it was a customer service smile, the kind you give to Nazim when he comes down from Whiterun to complain about the local produce. It did not reach her eyes. Still, there was something there, a flicker. Or maybe I just wanted there to be. Sometimes, when she was crushing ingredients with her mortar and pestle, she would look out the window and her expression would change. The polite mask would drop and she looked trapped, like she was looking for something beyond the stinking canals and the scheming of Maven Blackbriar's cronies. I knew that look. I felt it every morning when I fired up the forge. 7 days. I needed a plan, a proper one. Not just stammering about the properties of Chorus eggs. A smith does not approach a complex piece of Damascus steel without a plan. You heat the metal, you fold it, you hammer it, you quench it, you follow the steps. This was just a different kind of material. Softer, more complicated. And I had 7 days to get the shape of it right. I walked away from the notice board, the number echoing in my head. 7. It was not many, it had to be enough. The first step was a gift. That is what people did. It showed intent. It showed you were willing to spend a few septims. I was not a rich man, but I was not poor either. I had a small stash of gold saved up. But buying something felt wrong. A piece of jewelry from Medezi, some fancy silk from Tari. It would not be from me. It would be from my coin purse. The value had to be in the work. My work. I spent the afternoon at the forge, ignoring Balamand's orders for a batch of iron daggers for the city guard. I took a piece of silver, a small, clean ingot I had been saving. I heated it not in the main forge, but in the small jeweler's hearth. I worked it carefully with light taps of the hammer. It was not like steel. Steel you could bully. You could beat it into submission. Silver was softer. It bruised. It remembered every mistake. You had to persuade it. By late afternoon, I had what I wanted, A locket. It was simple, shaped like a mountain flower from the Gerald Mountains, the kind that only blooms in the late spring. The surface was polished to a soft gleam, not a hard shine. It felt warm in my hand. It was honest work. It was the best I could do. I cleaned myself up as best I could, scrubbing the soot from under my nails, and walked down to the alchemy shop. The sun was low, casting long, crooked shadows from the wooden walkways that crisscrossed the city. The smell of the canal was particularly ripe today. I clutched the locket in my pocket. My heart was hammering against my ribs like an apprentice trying to flatten a cold ingot. I pushed the door open. The little bell chimed. Muri was behind the counter grinding something that smelled like lavender and frost salts. And she was not alone. Leaning against the counter, talking to her in a low, smooth voice, was Etienne Gon. Of course, Etienne. He was a Breton too, a scholar or a mage or something. He had soft hands and wore fine robes that had never seen a day of honest work. He was always in there, talking about magical theory or Dwemer artifacts or some other damn thing I did not understand. He made a point of using words with 4 syllables. He was trying to court her too. It was obvious to everyone but apparently him. No, he knew. He was a smug bastard. He was holding a small metal sphere. It glowed with a faint blue light. A Dwemer relic, no doubt. He was explaining its function, his voice a self-satisfied purr. Muri was listening, her head tilted. She was not smiling her customer smile. She looked genuinely interested. My locket suddenly felt heavy and stupid in my pocket. It was a lump of metal. It did not glow, it did not hum with ancient power. It was just a piece of silver I had hammered into a flower shape. What was that compared to the mysteries of the Dwemer? Etienne glanced over at me. He did not recognize me as a rival. He saw a smith, a laborer covered in a fine layer of forge dust I could never quite wash off. He dismissed me with a look. "Can we help you?" he asked, his tone making it clear he meant, "What do you want, peasant?" I opened my mouth. I was going to ask for a potion of minor healing, but the words would not come out. I felt like a fool, standing there holding my clumsy handmade gift while he wooed her with forgotten magic. I just shook my head, turned around, and walked out. The bell chimed my retreat. I ended up at the Bee and Barb, drinking blackbriar mead. It tasted as bitter as I felt. Stenvar Ironhand, a guard I knew, clapped me on the shoulder. He was a big Nord, even bigger than me, with a beard that seemed to have its own weather system. "What is eating you, Snowshod?" he asked. "You look like you just tried to forge an ebony dagger and ended up with a bent nail." I told him about Muri, about the caravan, about the 7 days, about the locket and the glowing Dwemer ball. He laughed, a big booming sound that made the mugs on the table rattle. "A gift? You tried to give her a gift. Shore's bones, Jorgen, you are going about this all wrong. A woman like that, she does not want trinkets. She wants a man. You do not woo her, you tell her, you walk up to her, you look her in the eye, and you say, 'You are not getting on that wagon, you are staying here with me.'" I stared at him. That was the stupidest advice I had ever heard. That might work for a Nord shield maiden who could wrestle a bear. Muri would probably just have me arrested. Stenvar drained his mead. "Trust me," he said, wiping foam from his mustache. "Stop thinking like a smith. Start thinking like a Nord. Confidence. That is all it is." I ordered another mead and did not listen to another word he said for the rest of the night. The first day was gone. I had accomplished nothing. Less than nothing. I had run away. 6 days left. I spent the next morning at the forge, working off my frustration. Balamand had me on a set of steel plate armor for a Legion officer passing through. It was good, honest work. The rhythm of it cleared my head. Heat, hammer, quench. Find the shape of the steel, listen to what it wants to be. Do not force it. I had forced it yesterday. I had tried to make the day something it was not. Stenvar's advice was still rattling around in my head, as useless as a glass hammer. Confidence. Right. Today I would try something else. No gifts, no grand declarations, just conversation. I would talk to her. Like a person, it sounded simple. It felt harder than forging dragon bone. I waited until I knew her shift at Elgrim's was over. I saw her leave the shop and walk towards the market. I fell into step beside her. It was the most awkward thing I had ever done. "Muri," I said. My voice sounded rough, like stones grinding together. She looked up, surprised. "Jorgen, is there something I can help you with? Another potion?" "No," I said, trying to keep my hands from fidgeting. I wanted to ask you about your work." Her brow furrowed slightly. "My work?" "Yes, alchemy." It seemed interesting. I tried to remember some of the things I had heard her and Elgrim discussing. "So you mix things to make potions. What is the hardest part?" She gave me a strange look, but she answered. "The hardest part is the refinement. Anyone can mash some blisterwort and a fly amanita together and get a poison. But to get a pure effect, to distill the essence of the ingredients without the impurities, and that takes precision. A steady hand, patience." I nodded, pretending I understood more than I did. It sounded a bit like smithing. "You can melt iron ore and pour it into a mold and you will get a sword-shaped object. But it will be brittle. It will have slag in it. To make true steel, you have to burn out the impurities, fold the metal, work it until it is strong and clean." A small smile touched her lips. The real one this time. It was a tiny thing, but it felt like the sun coming out. "Yes," she said. "I suppose it is a bit like that." We walked in silence for a moment. I was searching for something else to say, my mind a complete blank. My expertise ended at the forge. I knew nothing of reagents and retorts. Then, of course, Etienne appeared. He seemed to materialize out of the damn shadows, probably using some cheap illusion spell. He glided up to us, a smug look on his face. "Muri, my dear," he said, completely ignoring me. "I was just on my way to the Palace of the Kings in Windhelm. I have been corresponding with Wunferth the Unliving about the resonant frequencies of soul gems. I thought you might be interested in my findings." He launched into a long, technical explanation that made my head hurt. He used words like etheric vibration and crystalline matrix. Muri was listening, asking intelligent questions. I was just standing there, a lump of a man in leather and soot. I felt my small connection, that tiny moment of understanding about smithing and alchemy, crumble into dust. Etienne was offering her a world of intellect and magic. I was offering her clean steel. I made my excuses and left. I told them I had to get back to the forge. It was a lie. Balamand had already closed up for the night. I just could not stand there for another second, listening to them talk a language I would never understand. 2 days down, and all I had to show for it was a single, fleeting smile. The next day I had an idea. It was a small thing, but it was an honest thing. I had noticed the leather satchel she carried her books and notes in. It was old, and one of the metal clasps that held it shut was bent and about to break. It was a simple repair, a 5-minute job for me, but it was something I could do. I found her sitting by the canal reading a thick book. She seemed to be taking a moment for herself before heading home. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, Muri," I said. "I noticed your satchel." She looked down at the broken clasp. "Oh, this? Yes, it is a nuisance. It keeps catching on my sleeve." "I can fix that," I offered. "If you would let me, it will only take a moment." She looked at me, then at the clasp, then back at me. She hesitated. I held my breath. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you." She handed me the satchel. I pulled a small pair of pliers and a file from my belt pouch. I always carried them. A smith is never really off duty. I carefully bent the clasp back into its proper shape, making sure the curve was perfect so it would not snag again. I filed down a rough edge where the metal had been stressed. I worked the hinge back and forth a few times. It was smooth. Good as new. I handed it back to her. "There you go. Should hold for another few years." She tested the clasp, opening and closing it. Her expression was one of genuine surprise. "It is perfect," she said. "Better than it was before." "Thank you, Jorgen." She looked me right in the eye, and the smile she gave me was not small this time. It was full and bright. My heart did a little flip. This was it. This was working. Practicality. Usefulness. This was my language. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, maybe a little too quickly. "It was my pleasure." We stood there for a moment. I thought for the first time that this might actually work, that I might have a chance. Then a voice cut through the air like a shard of ice. "Muri, what is the meaning of this?" A man was standing on the walkway above us. He was a Breton, older, with a stern face and expensive clothes. He looked down at me as if I were something he had found on the bottom of his boot. I recognized him from the marketplace, a merchant, a successful one. "Father," Muri said, her voice suddenly small. "This is Jorgen. He was just fixing my satchel." Her father's eyes narrowed. He did not look at the satchel. He looked at my hands, my clothes, my face. He saw a Nord laborer talking to his daughter, and he did not like it. "Come along," he said, his voice sharp. "We will be late. Etienne is waiting for us for dinner." Muri's face fell. "Yes, father." She gave me a quick, apologetic look, then turned and hurried up the steps to join him. He put a hand on her shoulder and guided her away, shooting one last dismissive glare back at me. He did not have to say the words. I heard them anyway. "Stay away from my daughter." I watched them go until they disappeared into the evening crowd. I had taken one step forward and been shoved 3 steps back. The warmth of her smile was already fading, replaced by the cold reality of her life. A life that involved her father and fancy dinners with Etienne. A life that did not have room for a smith from the Riften forge. The sun had set. The 3rd day was over. 4 days left. The 4th day was awash. I did not even try to see her. What was the point? Her father had made his position clear. Etienne was a fixture. I was an inconvenience, a piece of grit in the gears of her well-ordered life. I threw myself into my work, hammering with a fury that made Balamund raise his eyebrows. I finished the Legion armor, each plate perfectly shaped, each rivet seated flush. I took a commission for a greatsword from a Stormcloak sympathizer, a massive piece of steel that took all my strength to manage. The fire and the noise were a comfort. They drowned out the thoughts in my head. I saw her once from a distance. She was in the market with her father. He was haggling with Grelka over some leather goods. Muri stood beside him looking bored and tired. She glanced over towards the forge. I thought our eyes met for a second, but I could not be sure. I ducked back behind the heat of the forge, my face burning for a different reason. I felt like a coward. The 5th day I was desperate. The caravan was leaving in 2 days. The number was no longer an abstract concept. It was a weight in my gut. I had to do something big. I found Stenvar on his patrol near the Ragged Flagon's secret entrance. He took one look at my face and sighed. "Still chasing the little Breton girl, eh? Let me guess, it is not going well." I told him about her father, about Etienne. "See," he said, leaning on his spear. "I told you you're being too nice, too useful. That is not what gets a woman's attention. Strength, power. You have to show her you can protect her. You are a Nord for shore's sake. You have the strength of a bear in those arms. Use it. This was, once again, the stupidest advice I had ever heard, and yet I was out of ideas. My own plans had failed spectacularly. Maybe the direct approach, the Nord approach, was the answer. I did not believe it. Not really, but I was desperate enough to consider anything. The opportunity came that evening. It felt too perfect, like a scene set by one of the divines with a sick sense of humor. I was walking past the narrow alley that led down into the ratway. I heard voices. One of them was Etienne's, high and indignant. "I told you I do not have any more septums," he was saying. "Now if you will excuse me." Two figures were blocking his path. They were big, ugly men, hired muscle by the look of them. They probably worked for the Blackbriars or the Thieves' Guild, shaking people down for extra coin. "That is not what we heard," one of them grunted. "We heard you sold a shiny Dwemer toy for a lot of gold this morning. We think you should share." Here it was, the chance Stenvar had been talking about. A damsel, or in this case a pompous git, in distress. If I stepped in, if I handled this, Murray would have to see me differently. Not just as a laborer, but as a protector. It was a foolish thought, but it was the only one I had. I did not think. I just acted. I stepped into the alley. "Leave him alone," I said. My voice was low. I hoped it sounded more threatening than I felt. The two thugs turned. They looked me up and down. They were bigger than Etienne, but they were not bigger than me. I had a smith's strength forged over years of swinging a hammer. "Mind your own business, Smith," the first one snarled. "This does not concern you," the second one added. I did not move. I said, "He is with me." That was a lie and a bad one, but it was enough. The first thug threw a punch. I was expecting it. I moved inside his swing and hit him hard in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping. The second one pulled a knife. He was more dangerous. I grabbed his wrist, twisting it until he dropped the blade with a yelp. I shoved him hard against the wall. He slid to the ground, groaning. The first one was still trying to get his breath back. I stood over them both. "Get out of here," I said, "and do not let me see you again." They scrambled to their feet and fled down into the ratway. It was over in less than a minute. My lip was split where the first one's punch had grazed me. My knuckles were raw. But I had done it. I had been the strong man, the protector. I turned to Etienne. He was pressed against the far wall, his eyes wide. He was not looking at me with gratitude. He was looking at me with a mixture of fear and absolute humiliation. I had not just saved him. I had shown him up. I had used the one thing I had that he did not, brute force. And he hated me for it. Then I heard a gasp from the end of the alley. Murray was standing there. She must have been following Etienne, or just been on her way home. She had seen the whole thing, or at least the end of it. She saw me standing over two men, my knuckles bleeding, my face set in a grimace. She saw Etienne cowering against the wall. She did not look impressed. She looked horrified. "Jorgen?" she whispered. Her face was pale. I had wanted to show her I could protect her, but all she saw was a violent thug, no better than the men I had just driven off. I had tried to play the part of the Nord warrior, and I had failed. I had just confirmed her father's worst assumptions about me. I was a brute, a low-class brawler from the back alleys of Riften. Etienne straightened his fine robes, his face a mask of cold fury. He shot me a look of pure venom, then rushed to Murray's side. "Come, my dear," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "It is not safe here. Let us get you away from this animal." He led her away. She did not look back. I stood alone in the alley, the coppery taste of blood in my mouth. Stenvar's advice had been worse than useless. It had been catastrophic. I had gambled what little progress I had made, and I had lost everything. 2 days left. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my small room above the forge, watching the moonlight filter through the grimy window. My split lip throbbed, my hands ached. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow feeling in my chest. I had tried everything I could think of. The gift had been inadequate. The conversation had been clumsy. The practical help had been overshadowed by her family. The show of strength had been a disaster. I had run out of plans. I had run out of strategies. I was down to the raw material, and I was not sure it was worth anything at all. The 6th day dawned gray and miserable, a perfect reflection of my mood. Rain slicked the wooden planks of the city, and the canals swelled with murky water. I did not go to the forge. I told Balamand I was sick. He took one look at my face and just nodded. I walked aimlessly through the city for hours. I walked past the alchemy shop. The windows were steamed up. I could not see inside. I walked past the market where merchants hawked their wares under dripping canvas awnings. I walked up to the temple of Mara. I had not been inside a temple in years. The 9 felt distant, their concerns far grander than the romantic failures of a single smith. But I found myself pushing the heavy wooden doors open and stepping inside. The air was still and smelled of incense and old stone. A few people were kneeling before the statue of the goddess of love, their heads bowed in prayer, and one of them was Muri. She was alone. No father, no Etienne. She knelt on the stone floor, her eyes closed. She looked smaller in here, more vulnerable. I wondered what she was praying for. A safe journey, probably. A new life in High Rock, far away from the grime and violence of Riften. A life without me in it. I did not approach her. I did not interrupt. I just stood in the shadows at the back of the temple and waited. It was the only thing left to do. I had tried to shape events, to hammer them into the form I wanted. It had not worked. Maybe it was time to just let the metal cool on its own. She stayed there for a long time. When she finally rose, she seemed calmer. She turned to leave, and she saw me. Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a second I saw a flash of fear in them. The memory of the alley was still fresh. I did not blame her. "I am not here to cause trouble," I said. My voice was quiet, stripped of all the false confidence and desperate energy of the past week. It was just my voice. She stopped a few feet away from me. "What are you doing here, Jorgen?" "I do not know," I answered, and it was the truest thing I had said all week. I just ended up here. We stood in the silence of the temple. The only sound was the faint hiss of the candles. "I am sorry," I said, "about what happened yesterday, in the alley. That was not... I should not have done that. I was trying to help. It came out wrong." She studied my face. Her expression was unreadable. "You hurt those men. They were hurting Etienne." "And that made it right?" she asked. Her voice was not angry. It was questioning. "No," I shook my head. "Nothing makes it right. It is just the way things are here, in Riften. You see a nail sticking up, you hammer it down. It is a simple way of thinking. It is my way of thinking. I do not know any other." She did not respond. She just watched me. I took a breath. I had 1 day left, 1 chance, and no plan. All I had was the truth. "Look, Muri, I know you are leaving tomorrow. I know you have a life waiting for you in High Rock, a better one, probably, with people like Etienne who can talk about magic and books. I understand that. But before you go, I just wanted you to know one thing. I wanted you to know who I am. I am not a warrior. I am not a scholar. I am a smith. I spend my days in the heat and the smoke. My world is fire and steel and the sound of a hammer on an anvil. It is a simple world. Maybe it is a stupid world, but it is an honest one. When I take a piece of raw iron, it is nothing. It is lumpen, it has no purpose. But I can put it in the fire, I can heat it until it glows, I can see what it wants to be. A sword, a shield, a horseshoe, a simple hinge for a door, and I can help it get there. I hammer out the impurities, I give it a shape, I give it a purpose. I make something that is strong and true and useful, something that will last. That is all I know how to do. I make things. I do not know how to talk to fathers or how to be clever or how to fight in a way that does not look like brawling. All I know is the forge. All I know is how to make something good out of a lump of worthless iron. I looked at her. My heart was pounding. I had nothing left to hide behind. That is all I am, I said. A man who knows how to make things. I just thought you should know that before you left. I had said my piece. I had laid myself bare. I turned and walked out of the temple, leaving her standing there in the candlelight. I did not look back. There was nothing more to say. The work was done. Now it was time to let it cool and see if it had taken the right shape, or if it was just another ruined piece of steel. One day left. The morning of the 7th day arrived with a cruel, clear sky. The rain had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp. It was a beautiful day for a departure. I did not go to the forge. I could not face the heat, the noise, the rhythm of the work. It would feel like a mockery. I walked to the south gate. I did not know why. To torture myself, maybe. Myself. To see the caravan pull away. To see her face one last time. To put a final, definitive end to the whole foolish endeavor. A clean cut. A proper quenching. The area around the gate was a chaotic mess of people, horses, and wagons. Merchants were shouting, guards were trying to maintain order, and families were saying their goodbyes. Cedrin Belmont, the caravan master, was checking names off a list. I saw Muri's father supervising the loading of several large crates onto a wagon. He looked pleased with himself. I saw Etienne. He was standing near the lead wagon dressed in fine traveling clothes. He was holding a book, but he was not reading it. He was scanning the crowd, a smug, possessive look on his face. He was waiting for her. He had won. The scholar had beaten the smith. It was probably the natural order of things. Then I saw her. She was walking towards the gate carrying her satchel, the one I had fixed. She wore a simple, practical cloak. She looked like she was ready for a long journey. My chest tightened. This was it, the final moment, the end of the countdown. She walked past the guards. She walked towards the wagon where her father and Etienne were waiting. Her father smiled and gestured for her to climb aboard. Etienne stepped forward, offering her a hand. She stopped. She was only a few feet from the wagon. She could have reached out and touched it, but she just stood there. She looked at the wagon. She looked at her father, his expectant smile. She looked at Etienne, his hand outstretched, his face a mask of confident ownership. Then she looked back. She looked past the chaos of the gate. She looked over the heads of the crowd. Her eyes scanned the city, the crooked rooftops, the rising smoke from the morning forges. She was looking for something. Or maybe she was looking at something. At the city she was about to leave behind. She turned her head and her eyes met mine. I was standing half hidden behind a stack of barrels like a coward. I had not wanted her to see me, but she did. We looked at each other across the distance. I could not read her expression. It was not pity. It was not apology. It was something else. Something I could not name. Her father said her name, his voice impatient. Muri, the caravan is leaving. Etienne took a step closer. My dear, we must go. She did not look at them. She kept her eyes on me. A long moment passed. The noise of the gate seemed to fade away. It was just the two of us. A smith and an alchemist's apprentice. A Nord and a Breton. Two people from different worlds caught in a moment of absolute stillness. Then she did something that made my breath catch in my throat. She shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was a clear answer. She took a step back from the wagon. Her father's smile vanished. "What are you doing?" "I am not going," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the morning air. Etienne's hand dropped to his side. His face was a picture of disbelief and outrage. "What do you mean you are not going? Everything is arranged." "I have changed my mind," she said simply. She turned her back on them, on the wagon, on the journey to High Rock, on the life they had planned for her. She started walking, not running, just walking, calmly, deliberately. She walked away from the caravan, back towards the city, back towards me. She did not stop when she reached me. She just put her hand on my arm, a light touch that sent a jolt through my entire body. "Come on," she said. "Let's get away from here." I did not say a word. I just turned and walked with her, away from the gate, into the familiar crooked streets of Riften. I could hear her father shouting behind us. I could hear Etienne sputtering in protest. I did not care. None of it mattered. We walked until the sounds of the gate faded, replaced by the normal sounds of the city. The merchants, the beggars, the distant rhythmic clang of a hammer on an anvil. My hammer, my forge, my world. She had not said she would stay with me. She had not made any promises. She had not explained her decision. All she had done was make a choice. She had stepped off a path that had been laid out for her. The future was a blank, an unworked piece of metal. We would have to forge it ourselves, and that was a language I understood. 0 days left.